Hello, this is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. We are continuing an extended devotional on the application of biblical stories. And today we're going to talk about a story that's probably not as well known as others. This is the story of King Josiah, and he was a child. He was a pre-adolescent king, and we're going to read about his story. Well, I'll paraphrase a bit, but we'll talk about his story. But if you want to read the story, it's found in 2 Kings 22. And so basically what happens is this. Josiah becomes king and he's 8 years old. So that's kind of a big deal because he's a kid, right? And although like in some monarchs, if you're familiar with monarchs, some monarchs will have a child become a king and then someone else acts as regent. So really the regent kind of rules in behalf of this childhood king. Okay, now it doesn't say that Josiah had a regent, but he possibly did. All we know is that he took the throne at age 8. It tells us who his mother and father are and so on and so forth. We know that because of his lineage, but we know he's young when he takes the rule. And so as we read in this chapter of 2 Kings 22, we find that Josiah sets forth some orders. And let's look at what those decisions are. So basically Josiah wants some work done. And he wants the people who are in charge of the temple of God to pay the workers for the work that they've done. So he sends them to the temple. He's like, get some of this money from the temple and pay these workers for their work. And so he's not clearly in this time acting with the regent. We don't know how old he is specifically at this time. We just know he becomes king at 8, and it's implied because it's in the same chapter that somewhere in his early reign, he figures out something that's really kind of interesting, and it's that when they go to get the money to pay their workers, they find a book. And the book is the book of God. It's actually what one of the prophets had already written, and it was just in the temple. And so when he reads what the prophets have written, he's like, oh my goodness, we've been doing this wrong the whole time, okay? And so even though he's an 8-year-old king, the beauty of Josiah and the application that I want to bring to you is that he recognizes when he comes into a new understanding or a new knowledge of what should be done, he takes action immediately to get it done. And so he is one of the just rulers of the Old Testament. Interestingly enough, he's the only ruler to ever destroy the idols in the high places. And the idols in the high places was just this. They had like these false gods, these idols that they put up in different places to kind of declare their reign over a particular area, okay? And so they became like a sacred place where they would go worship. Well, there was these high places like on top of mountains and on top of these big trees that always kept idols. And even though they would destroy, like other kings before Josiah had them destroy like the idols in their homes or the major idols in the town, Josiah was the first king to actually come and have them destroy the idols in the high places. He sent the people out to get rid of every idol, every issue, everything that didn't line up with God. After this book was found and he found out what God's will was and how angry God was because of the idolatry of the children of Israel, in this particular case Judah, because Josiah is part of Judah, is part of the tribe of Judah. When he figures out that Judah and Israel in general has sinned against God and that God really didn't want things to be the way they were, he immediately makes an about face. He like turns around, goes in the other direction. He is secure and stable in that. And they go to see, some of his men go to see a prophetess to kind of ask about like, oh my goodness, what should we do now? We've been doing all this stuff wrong. We've been making all these mistakes. And when they see this prophetess, she tells them by way of God that they are protected, that he's protected, and that he would die in peace and he would never see the doom that Israel was going to face because of his dedication to making things right, like in being a just king. And so here goes the application. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king. I don't know how old you are, but if you have an area of influence, kind of similar to what Esther had, you have an area of influence in your own life. What do you do when you learn something better to do? Kind of play on words. What do you do when you realize that you've done something wrong? Even no matter how old you are, what if you've been practicing something incorrectly all of these years? How quick are you to do the right thing? How quick are you to make the about face and go back in the other direction and do what needs to be done correctly? I watch a lot of work with a lot of families that are in crisis or in distress that need restoration. And most often we can identify a time in which we went in the wrong direction. We can identify a time in which oh no, I've been doing this all this time, and you mean to tell me this is not helpful for my marriage, for my children, for my whatever, my business, for my church? These are not the helpful things to do. And it's like, yeah, no, those weren't the right things to do. So if you could do these things, this is what honors God. This is what God is calling you to do. How do you handle things like that? When you learn something new, and we should always be learning something new, right? Josiah was given this book that the prophets had written before he even knew that it existed. But we are given the word of God, and it's a living and breathing document. It's a living and breathing book. It talks to us and ministers us new things, helps us to change our path, to straighten our course, to get back in line. All the time is telling us new things and new revelations. And sometimes experiences are telling us that. Sometimes experiences are teaching us we need to leave something alone or pick something up, or we've been neglecting one thing or another. Whatever the case is, when we know that something is wrong and we feel convicted, not guilty or shamed, but convicted that we need to do something different, what is our response? Are we able to change? Are we able to turn and make the decision to do the right thing? King Josiah was a child, but he was able to do the right thing. I'm going to encourage you that we're praying for you, and we hope that you're praying for us. But I'm going to encourage you that specifically we're praying that when you know to do better, you do better. Because many people are, I'm too set in my ways. Oh, I've been gone too far. Oh, it's just been too long. Or, oh, what am I going to do? It's all messed up. It's basically, I've gone too far now to turn back now. Well, there's never a gone too far when you're talking about the Lord. If he's given you something, if you understand something differently now than you did before, it's never too late to make the right decision. And so I want to encourage you with that we're praying that you would make the right decision according to the convictions that God has given you. Not necessarily other men's obligation, not necessarily legalism or any rules, but that you would look towards God and you would find conviction in what he's called you to do, and you would do that thing. We are praying for you again, specifically, but then also in general. We hope that you're praying for us, and we will be back again Monday morning with another of our devotionals. Until then, be blessed. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.